Thank you for tuning in to the Union News. Tonight we have a special report on the Confederate Government. We will discuss their Constitution, Jefferson Davis and his cabinet, amongst many other things. Of course, we will be able to see how flawed their government truly is. Now we'll take it over to James, our Constitution analyst.
Thanks, Ron. Now we're going to take a look at our Union Constitution and the good old Confederate Constitution. Anyways, what you have to understand is that for the most part, the Confederacy did copy our good old Constitution. However, there are a few subtle differences that really do distinguish it from ours. For example, the President is elected to a 6-year term, except for the fact that they can only run one time instead of 2 times, as in our government. Also, some of the powers of Congress are limited. For example, they aren't allowed to levy a protective tariff, which they've got the tariff of abominations and the South Carolina nullification crisis right in the back of their mind. And Congress is not allowed to raise taxes for the purpose of internal improvements. Also, of course, slavery is allowed. That's one of the main differences that divides the North and South. Immigrants aren't allowed to vote, possibly something to do with the Know Nothing Party. States' rights were really advocated for in this Constitution. There's a lot of powerful governors in the Confederacy, and they wanted states' rights. However, the only part that does increase the power of the executive branch is the presidential item veto, which greatly increases his vetoing power. So those are the main differences between the good old constitutions. Back to you, Ron.
Thanks, James. That sounds like a pretty bad constitution that's really holding the CSA back. I can't believe they really think slavery should be allowed. Anyways, we all know we have a great president, Abraham Lincoln. But the CSA's president doesn't quite match up. Regardless, we'll talk it through with Jefferson Davis. Now let's send it to Harriet for a live interview.
Thanks, Ron. Now I'm here with CSA President, Mr. Jefferson Davis. So, President Davis, tell me, what do you think about the war?
Well, immediately after the secession, all I kept saying was, all we ask is to be let alone. And I worked night and day for 12 years to prevent the war, but I could not. The North was mad and blind, would not let us govern ourselves until the war came.
Well, I just think that you guys were very smart, so you couldn't govern yourselves.
You're entitled to your opinion. Next question, please.
Okay. Some people say that you ignore the common man and pay more attention to the rich. Is that true?
Well, it could be true, because I've actually contradicted myself on this many times. For example, I said, neither current events nor history show that the majority rule, or ever did rule. But then I turned around and said, our situation illustrates the American idea that governments rest on the consent of the governed, and that is the right of the people to alter or abolish them whenever they become destructive of the ends for which they were established.
I see. That does conflict itself.
Yes.
You know, that doesn't make very much sense, though.
I guess one can say that. Please go to the next question.
Okay. Why didn't you appoint a general-in-chief until the end of the war?
You know, I didn't delegate any powers to anyone else because I just thought I could do it all myself.
That was very egotistical of you.
Yeah. Probably a bad choice. Next question.
Okay. Do you have any final thoughts, President Davis?
Well, let's just say if the Confederacy fails, there should be written on his tombstone, died of theory.
Oh. Well, thank you for the interview. Back over to you, Ron.
Thanks, Harriet. Jefferson Davis was quite the smart guy. Anyways, on to the discussion of the Confederate cabinet. Let's send it over to Rudy, our cabinet analyst.
Thank you. Now it's time to analyze their cabinet. Now what you have to understand is there's 8 spots total in the cabinet, including the president's spot. And there's a lot of flaws with this cabinet as far as different personalities and people not getting along. For example, the Vice President, Alexander Stephens, and the President, Jefferson Davis, by the end of the war, they hate each other's guts. They're on complete opposite end of the spectrum, and they do not get along at all. And then 15 different men filled the 8 total spots in this cabinet. And some men, like Judah Benjamin, had to fill multiple different positions in the cabinet. So there's no cohesion, there's no continuity with the cabinet, and they really couldn't, get their own set style of government in place. And what you have to get from this is that without the fluidity in the government, things did not work out for the Confederacy, as you can see as a result of the Civil War. Well, anyways, we're going to send it right over to the other analysts to talk about other issues in the Confederate government. Okay, so some other problems, let me rephrase that. Some other components, we're going to look at the Confederate government with an objective point of view that's unbiased. Another component of the Confederate government was their monetary system, which failed horribly. Their dollar bill greatly depreciated as inflation rose. Additionally, the concept of cotton diplomacy was unsuccessful as well. This was the idea that in order to help them win the Civil War against us, they would get a foreign nation's aid, such as Britain or France, specifically Britain, which failed. And this was due to the fact that, well, one, after Abraham Lincoln gave out the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, Britain's working class really liked the idea of anti-slavery. Even though Britain's leaders felt sympathetic towards the South, they couldn't go against their working class, the majority of their population, so they couldn't back up the South. Additionally, the South's diplomats weren't the best of diplomats out there, and this made that part unsuccessful, which eventually contributed to their loss in the Civil War to us. Now I'll send it back to Ron.
That's all we have for tonight's show. Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in next week to see our special on the Ping Pong World Championships. Have a nice night.